We begin towards the bottom of Daf Ayin Hey Amud Beis. The first word on the line is Pa'i. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Shmuel. Yud Batim Zeh Lefnim Mizeh. You have houses open into a chotzer, but then one of the houses is not just one house, but it's a bunch of houses attached together, 10 in one row. Take a look here in picture Tov Lamed Aleph. So you see here a chotzer. There is a house open to it, but then there's another house that's a row of 10 houses together. So the question is, do all 10 of these houses have to participate with the Eruv Chatzeris in the Chotzer? Or only one of them is good enough? Which one of them? So he said, Pnimi Noisen Eiruvin, the inner one, the 10th one all the way in the back, that's the one that has to give the Eruv Vidaya, and that's good enough. As the Gemara will explain, because it's 10 houses lined up together, so the one that's on the inside, in order for him to walk out, he's passing through all the other houses. So all the other houses become like a base shar. A base shar is just like an entrance room to walk through inside the house. So his house, nobody walks through his house, the inside, the 10th house. But he walks through all the other houses, so they're not treated like a base shar. And the halacha with a beis shar is, as the Gemara will soon quote the Mishnah, that you don't have to make an Eruv Chatzeris with a beis shar. So only the 10th one has to make the Eruv Chatzeris in this Chotzer. Rabbi Yechanan says, Afilu Chitzen. Even the outer house has to also participate in the Eruv Chatzeris. Correct the Gemara, why? Chitzen beis shar. As I just explained, the outer house is a beis shar. That's the inside house is walking through there. Answers the Gemara, you know what Rabbi Yechanan meant? Chitzoin shel pnimi. The one outside of the last 10th house, in other words, the 9th house going in from the Chotzer, that house has to also participate in the Eruv Chatzeris together with the 10th house. And the Gemara will now explain the reason for this shitta. What are they arguing about? Mar Savar, Shmuel holds, Beis Shar de Yochid, Shmei Beis Shar. The fact that there's even just one individual that lives in that 10th house, and he walks through all the other houses, his passageway through all the other houses turns all the other houses into a beis shar, even though he's one individual that's just walking through. Mar Savar, Rabbi Yechanan says, Lo Shmei beis shar. If it's just one individual that's walking through all of them, that wouldn't be enough to consider all of them to be a beis shar. If you have two people from two houses that are walking through the other houses, then the other houses are a beis shar. So therefore only the 9th and the 10th house have to make an Eruv Chatzeris, and the other 8 are a passageway for these two individuals that are walking by from those two houses. If you have two courtyards, the Gimel Batim Beineyan, and between these two courtyards that also have a house open to them, there are another 3 houses that are in between them that are sort of connecting the two Chatzeris. Let's take a look in the picture. This is going to be picture Tov Lamed Beis. So you see right over here clearly 2 courtyards with the houses that are open to them, and 3 houses in between the 2 courtyards. Now, what happened? What do you do? So now, the one from one Chotzer is going to come into this place and places Eruv Chatzeris where? In the middle house. And v'zeh noisen Eiruvin v'zeh. And the other one, I skipped a few words, sorry. V'zeh barach derech zeh v'noisen Eiruvin v'zeh. So let's look at the picture again. What's happening is, so you have a house open to a Chotzer on one side, and you have a house open to a Chotzer on another side. And then you have the middle house that's not open to any of the Chatzeros. So what you do is, the people of the Chotzer on the right, they walk through the house that's open to their Chotzer, and they place the food for the Eruv Chatzeris where? In the middle house. And the same, the people on the other side do. They walk through the house that's open to their Chotzer, and they place the food for the Eruv Chatzeris in the middle house. They're both placing their Eruv Chatzeris in the middle house. What do you gain with this? Zeh nasa beis shar lezeh. So now what happens is, the house that's open to the Chotzer on the right is just a passageway. You're passing through there to place the Eruv on the inside house. So it doesn't need an Eruv for itself, because it's just a passageway. And v'zeh nasa beis shar lezeh. And the house on the left that's opened up to the Chotzer on the left becomes a passageway for bringing the Eruv into the middle house. So both of these houses will now not have to participate with the Erev Chatzeris because they're just a passageway to bringing the Erev into the middle house. And the middle house as well will not have to be mishtatet with the Erev Chatzeris because that's where the food is being placed. So therefore, only the people of the left Chatzer, the right Chatzer, from the houses in those Chatzeris will have to bring their food to the middle house. And you have it covered. The Gemara asks a similar shaila, but just to conclude over here, just skipped a few words. So the middle house is the place where the Erev is being placed. The food of the Erev is being placed. He doesn't have to participate and give any food of his own. And we learned about this before. The place where the house is being put does not have to participate with the food of his own. That's how you have the easiest way to make the Erev Chatzeris in this situation. Now the Gemara is going to ask a similar shaila, looking in picture Tov Lamed Gimel. So Badik Luhu Rochba L'Rabbanon. Rochba wanted to test the Rabbanon to see what they would say about the following case. Beis Chatzeris, again you have two courtyards, one on the left, one on the right. Ubeis Batim B'neim. Now over here there's no three houses between them, you have two houses between them. And where are they putting their Erev Chatzeris? So what they did is as follows. Ze ba derech ze v'nosan Eiruvin b'zeh, v'ze ba derech ze v'nosan Eiruvin b'zeh. Look inside the picture. So the ones that are in the, again, picture Tov Lamed Gimel, the ones that are in the right Chatzer are walking through the house that's open to their Chatzer. They're not placing the Erev in the house that's open to their Chatzer. They're walking through and they're placing the Erev in the next house that's really open to the Chatzer on the other side. And the same, the people of the other Chatzer on the left, they're walking through the house that's open to their Chatzer and placing the Erev in the house that's open on the other side. So is this going to work? Is this going to be a good Erev? Let's again see it in the words of the Gemara. What are they doing? Zeh ba derech zeh. The people from the Chatzer on the right are walking through the house that's open to them, v'nosan Eiruvin b'zeh, and they place their Erev in the next house over. V'zeh ba derech zeh, and the people from the left Chatzer are walking through the house that's open to their Chatzer, v'nosan Eiruvin b'zeh, and they place the food in the house that's open to their Chatzer on the other side. Kano Erev oiloi. Are they going to be kaina the Erev or not? So before I read the Gemara inside, the issue over here is they're walking through the house that's open to them. They're not if each one of these chatzeres would place the Erev in the house that's open to their chatzer, that's perfectly fine. So you have an Erev, each one of these chatzeres has their Erev placed in the house that's open to their chatzer. But now they're walking through and placing the Erev in the next house over. So what's going to be? So do we say the people that are in the right Chatzer, they're treating the house that's open towards their Chatzer as just a passageway, a Beis Shar. And they're walking through to the next house over, and that's the house where they're placing the Eruv. So the house open to their Chatzer is a Beis Shar. The next house over is the place, the dwelling where they're putting the Eruv. And the same, the people on the left, they're treating it in the opposite way. What they're doing is they're saying, no, the house that's open to their Chatzer, this is the Beis Shar. They walk through there and they go to the next house over, and that's considered the house. Should we say that? Does that work? Let's see in the words of the Gemara. Mi mashvinen luhu legabe dahai bayis, legabe dahai Beis Shar. Do we say that for one Chatzer, I consider this to be a house and this to be a Beis Shar? And if you guide us the next line of the Gemara, or legabe dahai Beis Shar, legabe dahai bayis. What it comes out of here is, when I look at these two houses in the middle here, there's sort of a contradictory status that I would be giving to these two houses. As far as the Chatzer on the right is concerned, the house that's open to it is a Beis Shar, because you're just walking through there, you're not placing Erev there. The next house over is the bayis, that's where you're putting the food. As far as the Chatzer on the left is concerned, it's the opposite. The house that's open to it is the Beis Shar, because they're walking through there and they're placing the food in the next house over, and that's the bayis. So the question is, could we establish these two contradictory statuses for these two houses that are between these two chatzeis? So they answered, the Rabbanan answered, Rachba, Shneim lekono Erev. They're not going to be kaided Erev because it's a contradiction here. Manavshach. Either way you look at it, it's a problem. Beis Shar mashvislei. If you're going to say that both of them are going to be considered a Beis Shar, because when you come from this side, they consider it a Beis Shar, and they consider it a Beis Shar. So if you're going to say that both houses open to both sides, it's just considered to be like a passageway, so then you can't put an Erev there. Hanaisan is Eiruvin beBeis Shar. a person that places an Eruv in a Beis Shar or an Achsadre or an open place, the place that has a third wall open, fourth wall open, Merpeses, a porch, an Eruv, that's not an Eruv, it's not a regular house, it's not a dwelling. Ibayis mashvisle, if you're considering both of them to be houses, because from each side, the other side considers it to be a house, and you can consider both of them to be regular houses, so then komitaltol lebayis the loy ma'aravle. So then it comes out that the house that's open to the chutzner on the right, there's no Eruv placed there. That house is a hefsik. Where's the Eruv being placed? Only in the next house over. In this house, there was no Eruv. How could you make an Eruv in the next house over if the house in front of it that's open to the chutzner doesn't have an Eruv? So basically, what the Gemara is saying is you can't create these two contradictory statuses and say that for one side the house is a Beis Shar and the other side considers that very same house to be the bias where the Eruv is. So therefore, either we consider both of them to be a Beis Shar and then the Eruv doesn't work, or we consider both of them to be a bias where the Eruv is being placed, but if that's the case, so then for each side the Eruv doesn't work. Because the chutzner on the right is placing the food in the inner house that's going to the other direction. So there's a house in between that there was no Eruv placed in it. And the same for the chutzner on the left. So therefore, mimonavshach, this Eruv is not going to work. Fragt the Gemara, why would this case over here be different than another situation by Eruv Tchumen where we see that we do go l'kula and we apply two opposite statuses to one period of time? Rava said, and this is a Gemara we learned before, two people told you, say v'arev aleinu, go and make an Eruv Tchumen for us. Le'echad, for one of them, Eruv olav mibayid yom, he prepared the Eruv when it was still day, Erev Shabbos, Le'echad Eruv olav b'bein hashmoshes, and for another one he prepared the Eruv at bein hashmoshes time. Now, Zeh she'Eruv olav mibayid yom, the one that he made the Eruv for him. Before Shabbos, what happened was, Nechel Eruvai bein hashmoshes. That Eruv was already eaten up by the time bein hashmoshes came. And the Zeh she'Eruv olav bein hashmoshes, for the one that he placed the Eruv down at the time of bein hashmoshes, Nechel Eruvai mishetechshach. That Eruv was eaten, it was gone when it became dark outside. So now the question is, you could only establish an Eruv Tchumen, you're establishing your Shvisa before Shabbos in this place when it's still daytime. That's why we always say that by Bein HaShmoshes the Eruv has to be there, because Bein HaShmoshes is that time when it's Shabbos enters, Safik Yom, Safik Laila. So over here, in this case, what do we see? What's the halacha over here? So Rava says, Shneim Konu Eruv. The Eruv for both of them will take effect, even though what we're basically doing over here is we are determining what Bein HaShmoshes is in both of these cases, and the opposite. In the first case, where the Eruv was made mib'oid yoim, and then by the time Bein HaShmoshes came around, the Eruv was gone. The reason why it's a good Eruv, because we're considering Bein HaShmoshes to be at night already, and the Eruv was there by day. If the second case, when we said that the Eruv was placed there Bein HaShmoshes, and then it was eaten up at night, we're considering Bein HaShmoshes to be daytime. And therefore the Eruv is good. It was eaten up later at night, but by Bein HaShmoshes, which is daytime, it was still there. So over here we see the same person made an Eruv for two different people, and that time period of Bein HaShmoshes is considered to be for one day and for one night. It's two different people. So why wouldn't we say a similar thing regarding these houses, that for one chutzner it's considered to be a Beis Shar, and for another chutzner on the left it's considered to be a bias? Why can't we give it two different statuses for two different chatzeres? So the Gemara says you can't compare. Hachi hashta. It's not a comparison. Hasom, Safik Yimame, Safik Lelia. This Safik, whether it's daytime or nighttime, Loi Minkere Milsa. The fact that you're giving it two different statuses to two different people, it's not noticeable that you're creating in one place the two opposite statuses. It's two different Eiruvin that you're giving to two different people. But over here, over here, these two houses in this place, if you establish that this house has a status of a house and not just a passageway, not just a Beis Shar, so then it has to have that status for the other chutzner as well. If for the other chutzner it's considered to be just a passageway because they went through there to put their Eruv in the other house, so for the other chutzner it's also going to be a Beis Shar. It's in the same place. Over here, the takana of the Chachamim, that you're changing the status of the house, legabe this chotzer, legabe that chotzer, as Rashi here says, will end up being a chucha v'tlula. It looks like a joke that they're establishing two opposite statuses to the very same house. And Rashi actually says, and what's the problem with that? We don't want to give an opening to the mouth of the minim the kursim to come and say that the takanas of the chachamim don't make any sense. So therefore, in this case, we can't give two opposite statuses. Hadron aloch hador. We begin a new Pedic, which also discusses now the halachas of Erev Chatzeris. But in this Pedic, it's going to talk about when you have Chatzeris that have a wall between each other, and the wall separates, so you can't make this Erev Chatzeris together with these two Chatzeris. The wall separates. But the question is, if there's a window, this Mishnah will be talking about a case that there's a window. How large does that window have to be in order to be able to share the Erev Chatzeris with both of them? As we'll see later on over here in this Pedic, there are certain cases that you must make the Erev Chatzeris together. There are certain cases where you could make the Erev Chatzeris together, which is what our Mishnah will speak about. And there are certain cases where you cannot make the Erev Chatzeris together, as the Mishnah here will say as well. So the Mishnah, Chaloin, Shembeim, Beis Chatzeris, if there's a window opening in the wall between the two Chatzeris that are side by side. Arba, if the window has the opening of 4x4 tfachim, b'toich hasara, and it's within 10 tfachim to the ground in this wall, ma'arvin. So then they are allowed, ma'arvin shnayim, if they wish, they can still make their chatzeros, their Erev Chatzeros separately. But also, the imratzu ma'arvin, the opening of this window is large enough and also low enough in order for them to be able to make the Erev together. They can make the Erev together, yeah. If the opening of this window is less than 4x4 tfachim, or the window is higher than 10 tfachim, so then they must make the Erev separately. They're not connected at all. They don't have the option to make the Erev together. So the Gemara will soon explain the shear of 4x4 tfachim. As far as the height of 10 tfachim, so that's simple, because 10 tfachim is the minimum height that creates a mechitza for a reshus. So if there's a height of 10 tfachim and the window is above that, so then you have a separation of a proper wall between the two chatzeres. They can't share together. If it's below 10 tfachim, so then they can choose to make an Erev Chatzeres together. So the Gemara, Leime, shall we say, that this is a Mishnah, a Stam Mishnah that follows the opinion of Rab Shimon ben Gamliel. What did Rab Shimon ben Gamliel say regarding Lovud? The Amar kol pachas marba kilovadami. Anything that's less than 4 tfachim has the halacha of Lovud. It's like it's closed up. So over here as well, we would say the pshat of the Mishnah is, what's the pshat in this measurement of 4x4 tfachim? Because if it's less than that, then it's like it's closed up. So if it has 4x4 tfachim, that's a proper opening. Right? But according to the Rabbanon, it should be enough if it would be 3x3 tfachim. Usually, Lovud, we paskin like the Rabbanon is 3 tfachim. So why wouldn't we say that the opening of 3 tfachim is good enough? Says the Gemara, no, Rabbanon. This Mishnah could follow the opinion of the Rabbanon. When did Rabbanon argue on Rab Shimon ben Gamliel that 3 is enough for Lovud? Regarding the din of Lovud, to consider it to be closed up. But in the opposite extent, to consider it to be open, that it's a proper opening, even Rabbanon agree, only if it has the opening of 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, is it significant enough to be considered an opening between the two chatzeres, and otherwise not. So this is according to everybody. Then the Mishnah said, Pachos midalav, right? So the first part of the Mishnah gave you the minimum requirement of how large the window has to be, and it can't be higher than, has to be within 10 tfachim to the ground. But then the Mishnah said, so if it's less than that, then it won't be good. So fragt the Gemara, Pshita. Why does the Mishnah have to say this? It's obvious. Kivin the Oma, Dalad al Dalad, B'toich Hasara, once you give me the minimum requirements of the measurement, that it has to be 4x4, and within 10 tfachim to the ground, so I know the Pachas Midalat, that if it's less than 4x4 tfachim, Ulemayla Miyud, and if it's above 10 tfachim from the ground, Loi, that it's not good. Why does the Mishnah have to spell that out for me? Answers the Gemara, Hakamashmalon. When the Mishnah spells this out, this is what the Mishnah is teaching me. Time the Kulei Lamayla Miyud. The reason why this doesn't work is because it's entirely above 10 tfachim. The entire window, the entire opening is above 10 tvachim. If even one part of it is within 10 tvachim, ma'arvin shnayim. So then you could make the Eirov separately, but they still could make it together. So the Mishnah here is letting you know that this that we say, that it has to be below 10 tvachim, it doesn't mean that the entire opening of the window has to be below 10 tvachim. Even if just a little part of it is below 10 tvachim, it's going to be good enough. So that's why the Mishnah repeats it again, that if it's higher than 10 tvachim, meaning that the entire window is higher than 10 tvachim, then it won't work. We have a proof to this, what it says in the Braise. The window is above 10 tvachim, but a bit of it is within 10 tvachim. It's all within 10 tvachim, but a bit of it is above 10 tvachim. They can make the Eirov separately, but if they want, they can make it together, because there's a part of the window that's below 10 tvachim. Fragt the Gemara, this Braisa seems to be saying something that's not necessary. Most of the window is above 10 tvachim, just a bit of the window is below 10 tvachim. In such a case, you say that they have the choice to make the Eirov together. If most of it is within 10 tvachim, the window is so low down, only a bit of it is above 10 tvachim, do you need to teach me that in such a case they could also make the Eirov Chatzeris together? And says the Gemara, you're right, it's not a Chiddush, but Zu, ve'ein tzarech leima zu katani. The Tana is telling you one din, and then follows up with another din, needless to say in this case. The Tana, the Mefarshim say, the Tana heard this from someone else that said these halachas. One Tana said this halacha, the other Tana said the other halacha, and he taught them both. He repeated the memories of both of the Tanoim that he heard in a manner of Zu ve'ein tzarech leima zu, which we have many times in Shas. Sagt the Gemara, Rab Yechanan said, Chaloin ogel. When you have a window that's in a round shape, tzarich sheyehei behekefoi esrim va'arba tvachim. So you have to have a circumference of the square inside this rounded shaped window, 24 tvachim. Okay, so take a look in the picture. Let's see where the picture is over here. Picture Taf Lamed Hey. So you have a round window, and inside this round window, so you have the square. So the circumference of the actually I believe it refers to the circumference of the circle around it. The circle around the square has to be 24 tvachim. The Gemara will explain why the circumference of this circle has to be 24 tvachim to give us the size that we need. What's the size that it said in the Mishnah? 4 by 4 tvachim. If you want to have a square of 4 by 4 tvachim in the square of the window that's round, the circumference of this round window has to be 24 tvachim. Okay? Ushnayim umashumen b'toich yud, and 2 tvachim and a bit of this circle window has to be within 2 tvachim, within 10 tvachim, that is. Okay? So, and the Gemara explains why, but let's take a look. Do they have a picture for this? No, they don't have a picture for this, but the point over here is, what did it say in the Mishnah? That at least a little bit of this window has to be below 10 tvachim. So usually it's just a mashu, just a little bit, that so you don't have a wall of 10 tvachim high over here. But over here, we can't say just a little bit, because you have the square inside the circle of this window. That's the opening that we're counting. We're not counting the full square for the opening. That square, that circle rather, has an extra 2 tvachim on the bottom that is not part of the square. So therefore, the Gemara says, She'im yirabenu, if you're paying attention only to the square that's inside the circle, nimtza mashahu b'toich yud. If there's 2 tvachim and a little bit of the circle of the window that's going to be going 2 tvachim and a little bit into 10 tvachim, so then you're going to get a little bit of the square inside the circle inside 10 tvachim. Hope it's clear. They don't have a picture for this, but that's the point over here. You want to have the square inside the circle to be within 10 tvachim to the ground. Now, Gemara is going to come back to explain how do we come to this measurement of 24 tvachim in order to get the 24 tvachim over here of the circle, to get a square inside that's 4 by 4 tvachim. So the Gemara starts off, and the Gemara goes through a whole discussion here, and l'chatchila the Gemara had different understanding of what Rabbi Yochanan meant to say. So the Gemara says like this: Mechti, let us see. We have a rule: Kol sheyesh be keifoi shleisha tfachim. Any circle which the circumference is 3 tfachim, yesh by beroch by tefach. So the diameter is 1 tefach. Okay, take a look in picture Taf Lamed Vav. Very simple and clear. So if so, going to back to our case, if so, b'treisar sagya. So in our case, what do we need? We have to have a window that has a width of 4 tfachim. If you want to have a width of 4 tfachim in this circle, so what do you need for the circumference? What do you get for the circumference of the width of 4 tfachim? You get 3 times as much as 4 tfachim, which is 12 tfachim. So the circumference of this window, in order to get 4 tfachim wide, should only be 12 tfachim. In other words, what's the Gemara's question? At this point, the Gemara understood that you don't have to actually have a square of 4 tfachim inside this circle window. It's enough if you have the width of 4 tfachim and the diameter, like in a circle, which is only in the center, and the diameter going across up to down, but you don't have to have 4 by 4 of a square inside the circle. So if you only need a circle where the diameter is 4 tfachim, so the circumference of this circle is going to be only 12 tfachim. So why does Rabbi Yochanan say 24 tfachim? Answers the Gemara, Hanamili bi Gula. That's only true if you're looking for that diameter of 4 tfachim only in the center in a circle. Aval biribua binon tfei. But if you want to get a square where there's going to be a full square of 4 tfachim inside this circle, then you need to have more space for this. Okay. Now the Gemara over here is going to explain. At this point, the Gemara is thinking that what are we talking about? Not that the square is inside the circle, but at this point the Gemara thinks we're talking about a case where the square is outside the circle, as it is in picture Tov Lamed Zayin. So the Gemara says, Mechti, okay, so we need a square. So let's see, how much larger is that going to be? Kama merube yeser ala igel. How much larger is the circumference of a square more than the circumference of a circle that's inside of it? Revia, a quarter of the circumference of the square. Okay, so if so, in our case, b'shitzer sagi, 16 for the circumference of the square, 16 should be enough. Take a look in picture Taf Lamed Zayin again. So you have the circumference of the circle of this window. So that's 12, right? Because if it's 4 by 4 tfachim, so then their circumference is 12, as we just said. It's 3 times as much as the diameter. And then the square around it, which also has the corners, not like the circle. How much larger is the square around this circle? 1/4 more, 16. So over here, for this circle in the window, in order for it to have the circumference of in the square, in order for this circle, the circumference of this circle, if it's square shaped, would only be 16 tfachim. Okay, so again, at this point, the Gemara did not understand that Rabbi Yochanan was saying that you need a square of 4 by 4 tfachim to fit inside the circle. He understood that we understand at this point that what we're saying is that the circumference of the square of this circle is going to be 24 tfachim. So the Gemara asks, no, it's only going to be 16 tfachim if it's outside this circle. Says the Gemara, no, but that's not what we're talking about. Hanimili igula denofik migoy ribua. That's only when you're talking about a circle that's inside the square. Alvo ribua denofik migoy igula. But if you want to fit the square of 4 by 4 tfachim inside the circle, binom tfei, you have to have more in order for this. If you take a look in picture Tov Lamed Ches, so over here you have the square and the circle that's inside of it, but then you have the shaded circle that's outside of it. So if you're going to have a circle that's surrounding the square, the circumference of this circle that's surrounding the square is going to be much more. Okay, so the Gemara explains, my time, what's the reason why a circle that's outside of the square is going to be a much greater circumference than the circle that's inside the square? Simple. Mishum morsha de karnasa. Because there's the corners of the square that it has to go around. It's on the outside. So that's what we're talking about. What Rabbi Yochanan was saying was, when you have this circle window, you have to have a square of 4 by 4 tfachim to fit inside this circle. And when he gave the measurement of 24 tfachim, what was he talking about? He was talking about the circumference of the circle of the window that has that square inside. So now the Gemara says, but it still won't fit. Why not? Mechti, let's see. Kol amse b'ribua. We have a rule, and we had this before a few times. Anytime you have a square of an amma, amse v'trei chomshi balachsoina. So that means that diagonally, if you measure diagonally in the square, you're going to get an amma and 2/5. So if you take an amma and 2/5, in our case, so we have 4 ammas, right? So you have 4 ammas, and you multiply 4 ammas diagonally. What do you get? You get 5 ammas and change. 5 ammas and 3/5. That's what it comes out if you measure it diagonally in order to figure out regarding the circle that has to make its way around the corners of the circle. Okay, so now you multiply that by 3. As we said, when it comes to the when you have the circumference, you want to know how large the circumference is, so you measure it against the diameter 3 times as much. In this case, you want to have the circumference of the circle that's outside, so we take the diameter that's diagonally in the square inside, and then you multiply that by 3. That should give you the circumference of the circle that's around the square. So if so, what's the cheshbon? What does it come out? B'shifser naki chumshe sagya. If you take 5 and 3/5 and you time it by 3, you're going to get 16 and 4/5. Or the Gemara says 17 minus a fifth. That's what it comes out to be. So even to get the circumference of a circle that's outside of the square, that's 4 by 4 tfachim, it only adds up to 16 and 4/5, not to 24 tfachim. So how did Rabbi Yochanan say 24 tfachim? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yochanan is following a different rule. Rabbi Yochanan says, Ki dayani de Kisri, like the dayanim of the city Kisri. V'omri lo ki rabbanan de Kisri. Other ones say like the rabbanan in the city Kisri. And their rule was as follows. The Omri, they said, Igula migoy riva, when you have a circle that's inside a square, riva. So then it's a quarter smaller, as we had it in the picture, Taf Lamed Zayin. The circle that's inside the square, it's a quarter smaller than the circumference of the square that's outside of it. But when you have ribua migoy igula, if you have the square that's inside the circle, how much larger is the circle in order to be able to go around the corners of this square inside of it? Palga. You have to take the circumference of the square inside and divide that in half and add it to the circumference of the circle. So when you have a square inside that's 4 by 4 tfachim, what's the circumference of 4 by 4 tfachim? 16. It's the 4 sides, 4 times 4, 16 tfachim for the circumference of the square. Take that number 16, divide it into half, which is 8, and add that number 8 to the circumference of the circle that's going to be going around this square. So that gets you to the number of 24 in order for the circle to be large enough, as you see it in picture Taf Lamed Ches, the shaded circle, to go large enough around the corners of the square. That's the rule that Rabbi Yochanan went by. Now the option over here is that you're talking about a cheshbon of a square and a circle, and the Gemara gives 2 different methods, and you can't really argue about this fact. When you have a square that goes around the circle, what is the right method to measure the circumference of that circle outside? Again, the circle outside the square, that is, what's the method? The Gemara gives one method, and the Gemara says Dayani de Kesser gave another method. How is it possible to have 2 methods? And Taisus points out it's the first method that we always use in Shas, and that's the correct method. You can learn Taisus and see the Arichas over here, how Taisus explains the Gemara, so there shouldn't be a Pisamachleikis in the Metzias here. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Pachas midala dal dalid v'chulu, it said in the Mishnah that the window has to be at least 4 by 4, below 10 tfachim. If it's less than 4 by 4, or it's above 10 tfachim, then it's a problem. Amar Rav Nachman says, Rav Nachman lo yishanu ala chaloin shebein beis chatzeres. The Mishnah is only being said regarding a window which is between 2 chatzeres. Al chaloin shebein beis batim. But when you have a window which is between 2 houses, afilu l'mayla ma'asara, so then even if it's higher than 10 tfachim, nami. You could also say, im rotzu la'arev ma'arvin. If they want, they can make the Erev Chatzeres together. They can make the Erev Chatzeres together. So inside a house, it's different. My timer, what's the reason that inside a house is different? Beisa, Keman, Damali, Domi. Inside a house, we had this svara before, I consider the house to be like totally full. It's not like open air space. Inside the house, it's considered to be full, and even a height that's above 10 tefachim doesn't matter. It says that height is still something that a person uses as an opening to another house, and therefore would be considered enough, even if it's above 10 tefachim, that he could use it to share and make an Erev Chatzeres with the other house. Fragt die Gemara, Rav Nachman, Rav asked Rav Nachman, it says in the Braise, Echad li, the same halacha applies, Chaloin shebein beis Chatzeres, a window between two Chatzeres. Ve'echad li, Chaloin shebein beis batim, the same halacha applies when you have a window between two houses. Ve'echad li, Chaloin shebein beis aliyos, the same halacha will apply for a window between two upper floors. Ve'echad li, Chaloin shebein beis gagin, same would apply when I have a window between a wall that's between two rooftops, or a window between two rooms. Kulan, and all of them, what's the halacha? Dalet al dalet, it has to be 4 by 4 tfachim, b'toy chasara, below 10 tfachim. So this is a clear braisa against Rav Nachman that says that indoors it could even be above 10 tfachim. So the Gemara answers, we'll explain this, achatzeres. That when it says this measurement of 4 by 4 and within 10 tefachim, that's only referring to the window between the chatzeres. The whole point of this brais is to say that all of them have the same halacha. Answers the Gemara, Tirgema adalid al dalid. When he was comparing them, the brais was only referring to the measurement of dalid al dalid, but not regarding the height. Regarding the height, indoors it does not have to be below 10 tefachim. Rav Abba asks Rav Nachman a question. Lol hapasuach min bayis la'aliyah. How about if you have an opening? There's a bottom floor, there's a floor on top, and in between these two houses that have two separate owners, you have an opening. Okay, an opening between the two houses in the ceiling. And obviously, the ceiling is above, it's higher from the floor, more than 10 tefachim. So now you have an opening between two houses, which is above 10 tefachim. Tzarich sulam kavua lahatirai. Do you have to have a fixed ladder there, like stairways, to be matter, to say that this opening is significant, that you can share between the two? Or you do not have to have stairs, you don't have to have a ladder, a permanent ladder, or stairs going up to this opening to the upstairs floor. What's the question? When do I apply the point that we said before? That indoors, it's like the whole place is full, and therefore the height doesn't matter. And therefore, even above 10 tefachim, the window between one room and another is fine. How do I say this minat sad? I only say that in a window, in a wall on the side. But maybe in the middle of the room, right in the middle of the room, going up in the ceiling, there's an opening. Maybe that's different. Maybe by the wall on the side, that's something that even if it's above 10 tefachim, someone will use it as an opening between him and his neighbor. So it's good enough to be able to share with him the Erev Chatzeres. But not if you have the opening in middle of the house in the ceiling. Or perhaps we apply the rule even in this case, that although the opening is in the ceiling above 10 tefachim, it's an opening, and you can share, and you can make an Erev Chatzeres together. Malay, Rav Nachman answered, you don't have to have a ladder fixed there. So Rav Abba thought, Sulam kavua dein tzarech. You don't need permanent stairways or a permanent ladder there. Hasulam arai, but a ladder that's there, that's removable, that you do need to have. Tzarech, that you have to have. But Itmar, Amar Rav Yosef bar Minyumi, Amar Rav Nachman, he said in the name of Rav Nachman, Echad sulam kavua, ve'echad sulam arai, whether it's a fixed ladder or stairways, or if it's a ladder that's removable, ein tzarech. If you have that opening between the bottom floor and the top floor and the ceiling of the house, you don't have to have any ladder there at all, and it's considered to be an opening that they can share Erev Chatzeres.